Good day to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for September 22nd, Monday. Happy brand new week, 2025. And to start off this new week, things are really beginning to heat up in the tropics now. Hurricane Gabrielle, which became a hurricane yesterday evening, is now Major Hurricane Gabrielle, the second major hurricane of the season, and the chances are increasing for two other areas of interest in the Atlantic for potential development that'll happen in the next week, potentially right after Gabrielle. So we have a lot of things to catch up to date now, and it's only been the difference of a day, and things are also really beginning to heat up, as I said they would. And as is typical for the month of September, since after all, it is the peak month of the hurricane season. Let's take a look at what we are looking at, though, with the latest tropical weather bulletin this morning. Hurricane Gabrielle, Category 3 hurricane, maximum sustained winds at 120 miles per hour, with a minimum central pressure of 955 millibars, located at 30.8 north and 62.3 west, moving north at 10 miles per hour. And this is going to pass north and then eventually east, once again away from Bermuda, which is obviously a good thing. I'll show you the satellite loop in a little bit, though. Does not mean that we're not going to have any impacts at all to Bermuda, even though Gabrielle will be passing away from the island, which obviously in and of itself, once again, is a good thing. But there are two other areas right now to watch, and both are increasing in their chances for development. We have one, a wave in the central Atlantic, which is up to a 70% chance in the next 7 days. And depending on what model you look at, this wave is has quite the potential, at least as I'll show you later on. The Google AI ensembles are really aggressive on this wave, although they're actually aggressive on both of these waves. Most of the models have one or the other developing, but the Google AI kind of has both. But we have 70% chance for one, and a 40% chance for another, and we might get tropical systems out of both of these areas. We'll just have to see, but things are really starting to heat up in the tropics here. And then really quickly, Tropical Storm Narda, 50 miles per hour, minimum central pressure of 1,000 millibars. This is going to go on to become a hurricane here in the Eastern Pacific, out to sea, luckily, over the next several days. But let's start off with Hurricane Gabrielle. Once again, passing just to the east of Bermuda, as you can see here. But Bermuda is still kind of in the outer, canopy of the cloud. And there's definitely probably some rain bands, a few showers occurring in Bermuda. And even as Gabrielle will pass to the east, still expect rip currents and huge swells and waves from Gabrielle, and not just Bermuda, but for the entire East Coast as well for the next week. But luckily, the center, once again, is passing to the east and eventually is going to start taking a more northerly turn. And this will be a major hurricane as it does so, as it is clearly a major hurricane right now, with a clear eye, a pretty nice, well-defined CDO, and this is probably going to continue to strengthen. Would not shock me if this becomes a Category 4, and this will again turn off to the north and then eventually to the northeast, and then out to sea, except once again, the Azores might need to watch for this, since, this might actually directly go over some of the Azores Islands, or in the very least, bring some significant impacts. And as I mentioned, the Azores is kind of a forgotten island because it's the middle of the northeastern Atlantic, but they will potentially get impacts from this as we head into the end of the week. And then eventually, as this progresses even further northward towards Europe, this will become probably a pretty potent extratropical low, and also bring quite a bit of impacts to maybe Spain and especially the UK. So something to keep in mind there. Here's a satellite look of the entire Atlantic right now, and you can see kind of a satellite picture that puts into perspective the multiple things that are looking interesting in the tropics right now. Obviously, one of them being Hurricane Gabrielle. Again, pretty well-defined hurricane, and again, will continue to strengthen. And then we also have our two aggressive tropical waves here, one in the central Atlantic and then one towards the western Atlantic here, closer to the islands. And I will say that even if this does not develop, you might still get some gusty winds and heavy rain here in the islands from this tropical wave. As you know, typically happens with tropical waves, even if they don't develop. And again, as I've said before, you don't need a classified tropical system to still bring impacts like you would experience in tropical storms. So if you're in the islands, please keep that in mind. But you definitely see there we have two aggressive waves here in the MDR, and both of these waves are what we are watching here in the next several days. And then in the Eastern Pacific, we obviously have Tropical Storm Narda, which is this area right here, and you can kind of see the rotation going on in here. So this is Narda strengthening right now, although kind of dealing a little bit with a weird setup here with the convection, especially with a lot of convective activity just off the coast of Mexico here. And again, Mexico might still get some heavy rainfall over the next several days, although Narda will obviously move off to the west here and move away from the Mexican coastline. And as it does that, it will actually become a hurricane. So, you know, another hurricane for the Eastern Pacific. And that's probably going to happen by tomorrow. Then we'll see how strong this gets. Maybe might even become another major hurricane. The GFS yesterday showed a major hurricane out of this, and so that might maybe add to the amounts of major hurricanes and strong storms we are tracking globally, from the Atlantic to the Western Pacific, and then looks like once again here in the Eastern Pacific. So looks like you guys have to watch that. Although again, Narda going to stay out to sea. But why is this all happening? Well, again, it's because of the MJO. It's because of the velocity potential, which moved through the Pacific over the last several days, which is why we had the spike in Eastern Pacific activity. And now you can see on the map here, this is a plot of the velocity potential anomalies, and green represents good, favorable rising motion in the atmosphere, and the brown represents sinking air. And you can see where all the green is right now. First of all, in the Eastern Atlantic, so an MJO or rising motion cell passing through the Atlantic, and makes sense that, we have quite a bit of activity happening right now. And again, it's probably going to continue over the next several days. We have another few areas of interest to watch besides Gabrielle. So activity really beginning to ramp up here in the Atlantic, and it aligns perfectly with the current cell of rising motion that we have over the Atlantic. Just need to see how all of our favorable conditions come together to produce activity, and also in the Western Pacific too, where we have two powerful typhoons right now, Typhoon Neoguri and especially Typhoon Regasa, which put on an absolute show in terms of, and it's still doing so, I believe, in terms of its satellite appearance, becoming a classic a West Pacific typhoon beauty. That's pretty much the best way I can explain it. And also in the Western Pacific too, we have a cell of rising air occurring there. So just goes to show how rising motion in the MJO makes an impact on activity. But especially in the realm in the Atlantic, once again, we have favorable conditions setting themselves up right now. And this is going to be very important because sea surface temperature anomaly-wise, we are still very, very warm in the Atlantic. Sea surface temperature anomalies, especially throughout the Western Atlantic, very warm, especially near Bermuda and the general Western Atlantic, and even in the subtropics, but also the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, pretty much all of the areas that were very warm this year from June and July, still warm right now, and we are now in the peak of the season, heading into the late season. And I mention that because it's especially going to be interesting to see what else happens when it comes to the Caribbean and Gulf, which is, the biggest area that we tend to watch in the late season. But even in the MDR too, since, this is kind of a late peak that we're having this year, again, for the most part, sea surface temperature anomalies still warm. And what do you know? That's going to fuel quite a bit of activity here over the coming days and weeks. This is the Google AI model going out to the next 2 weeks, or roughly the next 2 weeks. And what you see here, we have two areas that are really, really potent in terms of their signals. One of them, and these are both of the signals that we have from the National Hurricane Center, with the moderate chance and high chance of development. And you also see here a little bit of development in the beyond the week time frame, also coming off Africa here, which is why I also said, don't want to completely forget about the MDR because it's still warm. And again, the fact that we've had such a late peak season, it wouldn't shock me to get MDR development even as we head into early next month, being the month of October. And we've actually had some of that over the last several years of MDR activity still occurring as we head into the month of October. So we're going to have to watch and see what that does as well. I mean, probably won't be too impactful for us, although you never know. But what will be impactful for us is whatever happens here in the Western Atlantic, in which there is a lot of activity that happens. And I'm especially interested in the secondary area of interest that is a moderate chance right now, because that will become that will at least develop much, much closer to our neck of the woods, right along the United States coast, and even for those in the Caribbean and the Bahamas, because at least if you look at the Google AI model here, that's where they really show development occurring. And that's going to be very significant because, interests potentially along the East Coast might have to watch very closely. And I just want to show you here with the GFS model, as we take it out to the next week. Looks like, at least from what I'm seeing right now, or how the model runs have been over the last several days, the GFS has been especially aggressive on the area of interest closer to the United States and closer to the Caribbean, and that is the moderate chance area. And the GFS actually has that developing and seemingly becoming probably a pretty decent storm, maybe even a hurricane. And this is out to a week here, but it does get pretty close to the East Coast. In fact, I think maybe the GFS actually pretty much has a landfall or a very close approach to the Carolina coast. So we'll have to see what happens, but it is going to be very interesting to watch over the next week. And the GFS only develops this area here closer to the United States. We'll see, though, if that ends up happening, because, as I said before, it's kind of going to be a competition between which of the two areas develop. Maybe both end up developing, but I'll show you here. The GFS has the western area developed, but I think on the Euro, the Euro has the eastern area developing and becoming a pretty strong storm, while the western area here kind of still see the vorticity signature on the European. But this is the area that the GFS develops, and on the Euro, as you can see, is only kind of a weak system here that really doesn't come together. And the European develops the area that's further to the east. And obviously that's what we would want, because if the area further to the west here develops, as again, going back to the GFS, at least over the next week here, develops and becomes a pretty decent storm, and that'll definitely be quite an impactful event here along the East Coast. So we'll have to watch very closely. But again, things are really starting to heat up, and I said that this would happen, and it's, better late than never. Or, not really better, but you get what I mean. It was going to happen sooner or later, and even if it was going to happen later, it was going to happen eventually. And looks like now the tropics are beginning to heat up, and it's really now starting to look a lot like the peak of the hurricane season, after weeks of strange inactivity for the month of September, and it's only going to get active from here on out until probably late next month, when we start to calm down for the end of hurricane season. But with that being said, I'm going to end it off for today's video. More obviously coming throughout this entire week, since we have Gabrielle and two areas of interest that are pretty interesting, I will say, to watch. So please make sure to stay tuned throughout this entire week by subscribing, and commenting if you have any questions below. I will certainly try to answer your comments or your concerns. Although, please make your questions be productive. And if you don't have anything nice, I would really, really recommend if you just don't post it. Don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. If you didn't enjoy this video, just click off and forget about me. Don't waste your time posting hate. Plus, I don't really like dealing with it anyways. But that's just a side note. But enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Hope you have a great week this upcoming week. And as always, I'll talk to you again tomorrow.